This is the third in a four-part series as we're getting deep into a wonderful little book called Your Leadership Edge. And so the first two parts, and I love the order of the sections of this book. The first section was called Diagnose the Situation. So first, get a handle on that. Then the next section is called Manage Self. You start with yourself, and it's only then that you move on to the third section, the third task in your leadership edge, and that is Energize Others. So often we just want to jump in with people right away. Start with the situation, then with yourself, and then energize others. And there are 6 chapters, each one of them excellent, brief and excellent. And so the first of those is Engage Unusual Voices. And the authors of the book describe this as a rule. They say they have few rules, but this is a rule. Engage unusual voices. Draw in people that are not normally a part of leadership. Draw in folks who may have a different idea, maybe even resistant to a new idea, to get their perspective as well. With those new, unusual voices, you will move forward with greater energy and be better energized for a new direction. Then second, start where they are. And I love how these chapters also kind of go in an order. Start where they are. Spend time listening, asking questions, trying to understand where other folks are at. This can be tough to do. It does take time. It means we have to set our own ideas of vision aside. But I love this little quote in the book. You've started where they are if the ideas that are brought up resonate with everyone, because you've taken that time to understand where other folks are. And then the third chapter in this section is Work Across Factions. We understand and we know that there are different factions, especially because we lived in an increasingly polarized world. But even in the life of the church, there are folks who have been in the church newer or a longer time, or folks who are older or younger, or folks who have different faith backgrounds. There are all these different factions, and we want to work across those factions. We want to build trust amongst them. We want to look for common ground instead of things we might disagree upon them. That will help us build and move forward with trust, which is the next chapter. Create a trustworthy process, which means that we may not always have all the right answers for a particular problem, but if we develop a process that people can trust, then we can use that to head in a new direction or answer those challenges that we have. Now, this again takes time and listening and developing that process, and it will create some tension. Just because there's trust doesn't mean that there isn't some conflict and some tension. But when you spend the time to do this by asking open-ended questions, by really listening to understand, by being available to people as you build this process, then that's how you can get that energy to move forward, because you have that process that people will trust how the answers come about. And then the 5th chapter is Speak to Loss. It's kind of an age-old adage that people don't resist change as much as they resist the loss that comes with change. And so we need to address this. It helps build that trust we were talking about in the last chapter. It helps people work through that, grieve that, get unstuck, and it validates their feelings about loss that is going to come along. It may feel kind of risky. It will involve some tension and some conflict. We'll have to face the fact that that might be partly our fault, that we're, as a leader, bringing around some of that loss. But when you do this, when you acknowledge that, when you help people move beyond that, that helps them to heal and to move forward with the progress that any leadership initiative is going to need. which leads us to the sixth and final of the chapters in this section, Inspire a Collective Purpose. And again, I'd point out that you can only get to that collective purpose when you've done those things that come earlier, by engaging new people, by starting where they are, the factions, the trustworthy process, speaking to the lost. Then, after you've done that, you can get to that place where you have that sense of common mission and direction. They'll all flow from this. And you would think in the church that this would be easy. We're all following Jesus, right? Pretty easy. But even within that general mission of following Jesus, there are all kinds of nuances that need to be worked out, and to have that collective sense that we're moving along together. It gives you that direction to rally behind, gives you some common language that you're all speaking. Certainly, it helps people pour their talent and energy into that sense of direction of all working together. I really love the quote that was in the book that I think describes this. One of the author's aunts at her funeral, these words were spoken about her. She was described as someone who encouraged us not to conform, but to head in the same direction differently. That sense of each one of us being different, but moving together. So that's the 6 chapters in Energize Others. And then we'll end with the 4th section next week with Intervene Skillfully. Again, I hope that this has been a blessing. And if it has, pass it on to somebody else so that they can build up and grow in their leadership edge. Take care and God bless.